My girlfriend and I were walking here on Bank Street last night, walking our dogs, when we came across a young man who was defacing Queers For Palestine posters. Now, last weekend we had the Pride Parade here in Ottawa, and Queers For Palestine ended up occupying the Pride Parade, getting out ahead of the official parade and then blocking it when it moved up to Parliament Hill. My girlfriend and I were also a part of that. Very proud to have been part of that contingent that affected that occupation. But it's stirred up a lot of negative feelings within the community here in Ottawa. It's a little bit hard to tell how many people are angry about this and who come from the queer community, and how many people who are angry about this but don't come from the queer community. This young man who we came across last night, who was scrawling all of this nonsense about Queers For Palestine, claimed to be a person of the queer community. And I mean, who am I to tell him that he's not? But we have to face something. All of the people who are upset about what Queers For Palestine did, what we did in shutting down the Pride Parade, all of our critics, all those people who are upset about that, have to ask themselves, who are they supporting? Who their criticism supports? Who benefits from attacking Queers For Palestine and attacking queers who support Palestinian rights and an end to the genocide? And we really have to ask ourselves, whose side are you on? Because if you claim to be on the side of Palestinians, but you're against direct actions like shutting down the Pride Parade after Capital Pride refused to stand with Palestinians, if you blame Queers For Palestine, but you let the Zionist Mayor of Ottawa, Mark Suckliffe, off the hook, if you turn a blind eye to the realities that are going on about who supports Israel, who supports Israel here versus who supports Palestine, if you're queer, you run the risk of siding with people who are not good for your health. This whole thing has gotten me to thinking about a book by Yves Engler called Building Apartheid, Canada and Israel. This book is granted a little bit old by now. It's from 2010, but I think it has some really, really important insights into who supports Israel, what factors or factions of society in Canada support Israel. And as we're about to see in this reading, the Zionist entity is supported by Christian fascists here. We could call them evangelicals, but we should call them Christian fascists. So Israel is being supported by the same people who here in Canada want to demonize queer people. Let's read what Yves Engler has to say about who supports Israel, and then we ask ourselves that question over and over again as we consider the situation as it happened over the weekend. Who benefits from attacking Solidarity for Palestine? Let's find out. Among the most important friends of Israel are adherents to certain interpretations of Christianity. Biblical literalists have spurred popular sympathy for Israel and motivated Canadian political parties to ignore the suffering of Palestinians. In mid-2006, preeminent U.S. Christian Zionist John Hagee spoke on the outskirts of Toronto. Publicized entirely through Christian broadcasts and church bulletins, 2,000 evangelicals attended. In charge of the John Hagee Ministries in Canada, Charles McVety is Canada's leading Christian Zionist. An influential Conservative Party operative, McVety leads the Defend Marriage Coalition, Ottawa's Institute for Christian Values, and Christians United for Israel, Canada. What a charming guy. Quote, "Israel is the #1 family values issue," said McVety, explaining the connection between opposition to gay marriage and abortion and support for Israel. Quote, "Where does marriage come from? God. Where does the Bible come from? Israel. The first family of Christianity, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, were all Jewish. Israel is the source of everything we have, unquote. A busy man, McVeety presided over Canada Christian College in North York, Ontario. To honor Israel's 60th birthday, Canada Christian College created a department to study Israel. The department, quote, is a powerful symbol of the extraordinary working relationship and devotion of the evangelical movement with the modern state of Israel and the Jewish people throughout the world. McVitie goes on to explain, we hope that the introduction of this chair will serve as a catalyst for other Christian schools, both in Canada and abroad, to create similar departments devoted to the study of modern Israel, unquote. The department's first chair was B'nai B'rith's executive director, Frank Diamond, who is an unabashed supporter of all things Israel. Standing next to Diamond, McVeety declared, "We will stand together until Messiah comes." Canada Christian College also held a birthday party in May 2008, when close to 1,000 people gathered to celebrate Israel's 60th. The Christians United for Israel / B'nai B'rith sponsored event included Cabinet Minister Jason Kenney, who read a letter from Stephen Harper, Israel's Consul General Amir Gissin, and Ontario MPP Monty Quinter, who read a letter from Premier Dalton McGuinty. To highlight Israel's 60th, the pastor of the First Nations Family Worship Center in Winnipeg launched World Indigenous Nations for Israel. Reverend Raymond McLean told Israel birthday revelers in Winnipeg, "We are going to be celebrating all year because the Jewish people got their land back that God had promised them." McLean, who had been to Israel more than 8 times, said, quote, "I believe that since the Jewish people are God's chosen people, we have to stand with them." Canadian Christians regularly make political pilgrimages to Israel. Several months after the outbreak of the Second Intifada, in February 2001, 80 Christian activists boarded an El Al flight to, quote, "bring a blessing for the new Olim, or immigrants, and the state of Israel." Executive Director of Christians for Israel Canada, Dean Bai, explained, quote, "We want to stand in solidarity with Israel. We want them to know there are Canadian Christians who pray for them and who stand with them." 30 supporters of Bridges for Peace Canada, an international organization that brings Jews from Eastern Europe to Israel, joined the delegation. 2 weeks prior to this delegation, Reverend John Howson, a Bridges for Peace representative, led 24 pastors on a tour of Israel. Howson split his time between Winnipeg and his office in Jerusalem. In June 2008, Howson, then National Director of Bridges for Peace, said, "We aren't going to fall for the Palestinian verbiage. We know that only Israel and the Jews will safeguard our freedom of access to our religious sites. It seems strange for the Palestinians to be demanding more liberties when Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered them East Jerusalem and sovereignty on the Temple Mount, and they turned it down," unquote. These missions, which strengthen support for expansionist policies among Israelis, are largely designed for the Canadian public. In March 2003, 20 leading evangelical authors, television personalities, and educators went on a week-long solidarity mission to Israel. Charles McVeety said that the mission was to educate evangelicals why, according to Scripture, they must support Israel. Upon returning, mission delegates were expected to, quote, "stand up and support Israel," unquote. Sounds like a threat. The delegation included representatives from evangelical TV stations in Winnipeg, Trinity TV, Lethbridge, Miracle Channel, Burlington, Crossroads Christian Communications, and Vancouver, Now TV. a Toronto-based author who has sold millions of copies of more than 20 books on biblical prophecy, Grant Jeffrey, said mission participants, quote, believe Israel needs to be supported as a vibrant democracy in a sea of dictatorships. We want to commit and we say we stand with Israel shoulder to shoulder, unquote. Israel's tourist office, along with McVetti and El Al Airlines, organized this March 2003 tour for media personalities. Israel promotes its holy credentials to garner political support among Bible literalists and to strengthen its tourism industry, one of the country's leading sources of foreign currency earnings. Tourism plummeted with the outbreak of the Second Intifada, but then Christians, quote, saved the industry, unquote. Israeli Tourism Minister Benny Elon told the Canadian Jewish News in May 2008. With North American Christians, the country's leading source of tourists, 75,000 Canadians visited Israel in 2008. 75,000. Israel's tourist office runs ads on Canadian Christian television that highlight, quote, the spiritual dynamic that occurs during a trip to the Holy Land, unquote. One ad says, visit Israel, you'll never be the same. Another tells the viewer, don't put your soul on hold. Many Canadian ministries operate public tours of Israel. Back to the Bible Canada Tour of the Holy Lands is one example, and a rather long-winded one at that. A number of Christian organizations, many subsidized through tax write-offs, also work to send Jews to Israel. An international organization with a Canadian chapter, Bridges for Peace, leads Project Ezra, which helps Jews in remote regions obtain passports, visas, and other necessary goods for the trip to Israel. Additionally, Bridges for Peace works with the Jewish Agency to pay for the Exobus. What is an Exobus? A Christians for Israel C4I initiative. Quote, the Exobus program ferries Jews from Eastern European villages to airports and seaports on the first leg of their journey to Israel, unquote. Supported by a Canadian chapter, Holland-based C4I claims to have helped more than 80,000 Russian, Ethiopian, and Indian Jews emigrate to Israel. In 1999, Reverend John Howson, director of Bridges for Peace, raised $68,000 US from his Winnipeg supporters for immigration initiatives. His pitch? Quote, God is calling the Jewish people back to the land of Israel for fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and we should help them, unquote. In 2005, McVetti launched a campaign to raise $1 million for an Israeli charity. Quote, this is part of our Israel You're Not Alone campaign, McVetti said. The biggest source of Christian money for Israeli immigration comes from the John Hagee Ministries in Canada, which had raised more than $4 million in tax-deductible donations by early 2003. According to a spokesperson, the Hagee Ministries regularly send checks to Israeli groups. While early Canadian Christian Zionism was spurred by British religious and imperial thinking, today's movement is heavily influenced by the social forces that support the U.S. empire. Some claim McVetti and other Christian Zionists are funded by their U.S. counterparts. They deny it. Of course they do. But there is no denying that Canada Christian College, for instance, houses nearly 24 U.S.-based evangelical tenants, including Oral Roberts Ministries and John Hagee's Canadian Command Post, which sells up to $1 million a year worth of books and DVDs. Zionism is particularly strong among evangelical leaders who would like Canada to mimic socially regressive, God-fearing US hypercapitalism. Less influential than their southern counterparts, about 10% of Canadians identify as evangelicals. An ardent supporter of US imperialism, former head of the Alliance Party and international trade minister in Harper's cabinet, Stockwell Day, has never drawn significant Jewish support, understandably. In October 2004, Day said, quote, "I will continue to speak and act in the House of Commons as if this is a Christian nation," unquote. His Penticton, British Columbia riding cannot have more than a handful of Jews, yet Day has long backed Israel. An advisor to Day on international politics, Carleton University history professor emeritus Paul Merkley, says it's untrue that, quote, "the most important factor in keeping Israel secure is the US Jewish vote," unquote, which is less than 2% of the total. Rather, he said, it's evangelical Zionists who support Israel because, quote, "they sense that the people who hate Israel are the people who hate America. It's an adjunct of conservative patriotism," unquote. The president of the right-wing Canadian Centre for Policy Studies, Joseph Ben-Ami, makes the same point about Canada. Quote, "The Jewish community in Canada is 380,000 strong. The evangelical community is 3.5 million. The real support base for Israel is Christians." Now, I think we should really think about that. I mean, okay, granted this book is from 2010, so it's a little bit out of date. But to all the people who are butthurt, or shall I say pearl clutching, about the Queers For Palestine occupation of the Pride Parade here in Ottawa this past weekend, ask yourself, who do you align with when you attack Queers For Palestine? If you are not anti-genocide, if you are not anti-occupation, or if you are anti-genocide and anti-occupation, but you don't support what Queers For Palestine did, maybe you support more conservative measures to stop genocide, you don't think that what happens in Gaza has anything to do with gays in Ottawa? Man, oh man, we are in deep, deep trouble. Queers and Palestinians have the same enemy: settler colonial white supremacy and its religious fundamental arm, evangelical Christianity. Christian nationals are coming for us. And if we don't stop fighting amongst ourselves, particularly when we are doing the work of resistance, we are going to be overtaken by racists. Thank you for joining me. Like this video if you got anything out of it, and comment and subscribe and all that noise, and we'll see you in another video. Ciao for now.